To know more about the fascinating folklore of Nagaland, we invite you to follow us, as our stories are the result of arduous exploration in reliable sources like Naga Journal, Intac Archive, Sahapedia, and Eastern Mirror, which preserve and document the cultural traditions of the tribes of Nagaland. Now then, let's begin with this incredible story. In the fertile highlands of Nagaland in northeast India lies the village of Konoma, home of the Angami warriors. With its deep history and close connection to the land, Konoma is a place shrouded in mystery, surrounded by mountains and covered in thick forests. Its people, the Naga, have lived in these hills for centuries, hunting, farming, and paying homage to the spirits of nature they believe protect their home. This fortified village has a fearsome reputation among neighboring tribes, but also among those who from faraway lands have tried to impose themselves on its territory. Our protagonist, Aken, is a young Konoma warrior who at 17 has already gained respect among his community. His father, an experienced warrior, has taught him the art of war and hunting, as well as the principles of bravery and loyalty to his people. Aken is brave, skilled with shield and spear, and possesses an unbreakable will. His weathered skin and defiant gaze reflect the indomitable character of the Angami, and in his heart beats a deep love for the hills and forests of Konoma. Aken has heard stories since childhood about how his people's ancestors defended the village from foreign invaders. These tales fuel his sense of pride and teach him that Konoma's freedom and autonomy are treasures that must be protected at all costs. However, he has never known real conflict in his short life, as his generation has grown up in relative peace. Despite his youth, Aken constantly wonders if he will one day be able to prove his worth and face challenges as his ancestors did. One day, while Aken is hunting in the nearby hills, he hears rumors from older warriors about the arrival of a foreign army. The village elders speak of the sahibs, pale-skinned men in strange clothing who have come from the west, crossing rivers and mountains, conquering villages and subduing towns to their will. These foreigners, later known as the British, have begun to extend their influence in northeastern India, advancing ever closer to Nagaland. Veteran warriors tell of how these invaders impose their laws, build forts, and demand tribute from the villages they conquer. Their methods are different, unknown to the Konoma warriors, and they are rumored to bring weapons never seen before. Cannons and rifles capable of causing great destruction at a distance. At first, Aken listens to these tales with skepticism. To him, his village and its people are invincible. How could these strange men, who have no understanding of the land or respect for the sacred mountains, defeat the Angami warriors? As the days pass, however, the rumors intensify and unrest grows in Konoma. The elders call meetings in the village's large central square, and Aken notices his father's countenance growing increasingly somber. His mother, usually calm and patient, now murmurs prayers to the protective spirits at every opportunity. Finally, one evening, as the sun begins to set behind the mountains, the Council of Elders makes a decision. They know that the British are coming, and that there is no choice but to resist. Konoma's history is filled with tales of resistance and fortitude, and the elders feel that this generation must live up to that legacy. The village chief stands in the midst of the crowd and in a firm voice declares that they will fight back to the last man. No one will run, no one will surrender. For Aken, this is a decisive moment. Until that day, he had dreamed of battles and heroism, but now the threat is real. He feels a mixture of fear and excitement, an adrenaline rushing through his body. He looks around and sees his friends, other young warriors who also wear expressions of wonder and determination. He knows that, like them, he must prepare to face a formidable enemy. That night, as they prepare for war, Aken remembers his father's words. Courage is not being afraid, but facing it for those you love and for what you believe in. These words echo in his mind as he looks out at the hills surrounding his village, wondering if, like his ancestors, he will be able to defend them. The next few days are filled with activity. Warriors prepare their weapons, reinforce the walls, and plot strategies to take advantage of the mountainous terrain surrounding the village. They know they must use their knowledge of the place, every rock, every tree, every hidden path. Elders give instructions on rituals to obtain the blessing of the gods, and the women of the village sing and pray, filling the air with an air of solemnity and strength. Aken, meanwhile, spends his nights training until dawn, practicing with his spear and shield, and listening to his father's advice. Deep down, he feels the tension between fear and excitement of the unknown. Aware that the British are an enemy unlike any he has ever faced, he promises himself that he will not give in and that he will fight to the end to protect his land and his people. Finally, the day of confrontation draws near, and with it comes the event that will change Aken's life forever. In the early morning, when the sky is still dark and the village is silent, a guard reports that he has spotted the British on the nearby hills, advancing slowly but resolutely. The shadows of helmets and bayonets appear in the distance, and a shiver runs through Aken's body. He takes a deep breath and, holding his spear tightly, looks towards the hills where the silhouette of the invaders begins to take shape against the horizon. The first rays of dawn are breaking through, revealing the metallic glints of enemy weapons. At that moment, Aken understands that this is not a dream, nor a story told by the fire. This is real. His blood begins to pump strongly, filling his body with energy and resolving any doubts he may have had. Khonoma's warriors, led by the elders and the most experienced men, quickly gather in formation. Aken watches as his father steps forward, his figure firm and imposing, like an oak that fears no storm. His father's confidence, his calm courage, fills Aken with a new conviction. It is at moments like this, he thinks, that men become legends. As the British army advances, the village chief addresses everyone in a loud voice. He speaks of the ancestors, of the generations who have protected this land, of the struggles and sacrifices that have kept their culture and freedom intact. "This is our land, the home of our ancestors and the future of our children," he proclaims in a deep voice. "Here we stand firm, because this land belongs not only to us, but to all those who came before and those who will come after. No one will take away our freedom." The young men, including Aken and his friends, shout back, a clamor of defiance that echoes across the hills. The men and women of Konoma are prepared to fight, to defend what is theirs, even if they face an army armed with superior technology. The war drums begin to beat, filling the air with a frenetic, powerful rhythm that quickens the hearts of all present. The battle begins with the first shot from a British cannon. Aken has never heard such a thunderous sound. The explosion reverberates across the valley, and he sees a section of the village wall crumble under the impact. A moment of panic grips him, but he quickly composes himself. He knows he cannot afford to hesitate. Not now. Not in the face of the enemy. The entire village depends on each warrior standing firm. Following instructions given to them by their elders, Khonoma's warriors disperse among the trees and rocks, using their knowledge of their territory to avoid being shot. The Angami strategy is to attack from a distance and retreat, using guerrilla tactics to counter the British's numerical and firepower superiority. Aken, along with other young men, ambushes British soldiers trying to advance along the narrow paths, throwing arrows and stones before disappearing into the bushes. The day passes in chaos of screams, gunfire, and explosions. Aken fights with all his might, using every lesson his father taught him, every trick learned in training. Khonoma's village resists like a wounded but defiant lion, wounding its attackers at every opportunity. The battle is exhausting, however, and the weight of resistance begins to take its toll on the village's warriors. As night falls, the situation becomes critical. Aken finds himself covered in dust and sweat, his muscles aching but his resolve intact. Although they have inflicted casualties on the enemy, the village has also suffered losses. Among the fallen, Aken recognizes some familiar faces, friends and training partners. A deep, bitter pain looms over him, but at the same time, a silent rage gives him the strength to continue. At that moment, Aken understands that this fight is more than just an act of resistance. It is a test, an affirmation of the identity and dignity of his people. They are not fighting just for their homes, but for their right to exist as a people, to keep their traditions and freedom alive. Each fallen warrior becomes a symbol of sacrifice, and Aken silently vows to honor their deaths by fighting until his last breath. The night brings a temporary truce as both sides retreat to lick their wounds and regain strength. Aken sits with his father and a few warriors, sharing the meager food that remains. No one speaks. The weariness and sadness are palpable, but between tired glances and open wounds, there is a firm resolve. Tomorrow, they will face the enemy again, with the same ferocity and bravery. Konoma may fall, but it will do so as an indomitable fortress. That night, Aken sleeps little, and when he closes his eyes, images of the battle replay in his mind. He dreams of the spirits of his ancestors, watching him from the shadows of the trees, judging whether he and his generation are living up to the legacy left to them. In his dream, Aken feels small, vulnerable, but at the same time he feels a strange warmth, as if an invisible hand were giving him strength. When he wakes at dawn, he feels a renewed determination. The second day of battle is even more brutal than the first. The British advance in greater force, using their cannons to break through the village's fortifications. But Konoma's warriors do not give up. Aken and his father fight side by side, and at one point Aken witnesses his father take on a British officer armed with a sword. The fight is fierce and fast, and although Aken's father manages to knock the officer down, he receives a deep wound to the abdomen. Aken feels a surge of terror as he watches his father fall. He runs to him, oblivious to the danger, and holds him as the life drains from his eyes. With his dying breath, his father whispers to him, "Fight for what is ours." Freedom is more precious than life itself. These words are etched into Aken's heart, becoming his mantra and his promise. Even though the pain is unbearable, even though he wants to scream and cry, he knows he must keep fighting, not just for his father, but for his entire village. With renewed fury, Aken takes his father's place at the head of the warriors. He leads the attacks with an intensity that surprises his companions, and his example inspires the young who follow him. He knows that his father has sacrificed his life for the freedom of Konoma, and he will not let that sacrifice be in vain. As night falls, the battle turns into a showdown, with each side fighting to hold on to the ground. Konoma's village still stands, though wounded, and the spirit of its warriors shines with unbreakable strength. For Aken, this is the beginning of a journey that will change his life and the fate of his people forever. The next morning comes with a deceptive calm. Mist clings to the hills, temporarily hiding the British warriors and giving the people of Konoma some respite. Aken looks out over the devastated village, the remains of the destroyed walls and the ground covered in footprints and blood. The figure of his father, fallen in battle, remains etched in his mind. But there is no time to mourn. He and his people must gather their strength and prepare for what is to come. Aken has become overnight a leader for the young warriors. His friends look up to him with respect, and some of the older ones begin to trust him, recognizing in his eyes the same fire as his father. However, the weight of this responsibility is immense, and Aken fears that he will not be up to it. He knows that the next offensive could be even more brutal, but he also knows that his father and his ancestors trusted him, and every warrior of Konoma. As the village reorganizes and strengthens its defenses, new rumors arrive. Other neighboring villages have fallen under British control, unable to resist foreign weapons and strategies. Refugees begin to arrive in Konoma, some wounded, others simply exhausted and without hope. They seek protection and support in the legendary fortress of the Angami warriors. The arrival of these people adds a new tension in the community. Food and resources are scarce, and the responsibility of protecting the new refugees represents a burden that is felt as an additional risk. But the elders decide to take them in. They believe that each life saved is a triumph over the oppressor. One of these refugees is a woman named Nying from the village of Jakama. She is only a year older than Aken and is known throughout the villages for her healing skills and use of medicinal herbs. Her arrival brings a strange peace to Aken, who, although exhausted, feels a new glimmer of hope at the sight of her. Nying, with her calm gaze and determination, begins to tend to the wounded, preparing potions and bandages, and offering words of comfort. Her presence comforts the warriors, who see in her a figure of support amidst the chaos. As Aken and his companions keep watch over the hills, Niang offers him some advice on how to care for his wounds, both physical and emotional. Although he is a warrior, he listens attentively. There is something about Niang that makes him feel at peace, even in the midst of war. In turn, she seems fascinated by the bravery and will to fight that Aken displays. A bond forms between them that goes beyond simple camaraderie. However, neither of them has time to think about this. War is the only thing occupying their minds. As the days pass, Aken notices that the British's behavior has changed. The invaders no longer attempt to attack the village directly, but instead surround the area, setting up camps at strategic points in the hills. It is clear that they are waiting for reinforcements and preparing a final assault. Khonoma's warriors understand the tactic. The enemy wants to wear them down, cut off their resources, and subdue them through exhaustion. Faced with this threat, the Council of Elders calls a meeting to decide the next steps. The tension is palpable as each member puts forward their opinion, some arguing that the only option is an honorable surrender to save the lives of the most vulnerable. Others, however, believe that resistance is the only alternative, no matter the cost. Aken listens in silence, his thoughts torn between his duty and the fear he feels of losing everything he loves. Finally, he stands up and in a firm voice declares that, although the situation is critical, surrendering would mean betraying all those who have given their lives for Konoma. We cannot give up our freedom, because once we give it up, we will never get it back, he says, and his words are echoed by other young warriors who support him. The council decides to resist, but with a new strategy. Aken and a select group of warriors carry out night raids on British camps, attacking by surprise and destroying their supplies. Guerrilla tactics allow the Angami to weaken enemy forces without risking direct confrontation. Agile and cunning, Aken leads many of these raids, and his fame as a warrior spreads quickly. Night after night, Khonoma's warriors slip through the darkness, attacking and disappearing like shadows, leaving the British baffled. During one of these raids, Aken and his companions manage to set fire to an ammunition depot. The explosions echo through the night, lighting up the sky and filling the British soldiers with fear. This blow is significant, as it not only weakens the invading forces, but also instills renewed hope in the Konoma warriors. However, Aken knows that these attacks are only small victories and that the enemy remains formidable. One night, as they prepare for another raid, Aken meets Niang outside the village. The young healer hands him a talisman, made of feathers and small stones, which she claims will provide him with protection in battle. Aken accepts the amulet, touched by the gesture. Although he does not believe in magic, Niang's presence gives him strength, and his amulet becomes a symbol of hope. She whispers to him, "You are stronger than you think, Aken. Protect your people and do not allow the darkness to consume you." Her words remind him of his father's sacrifice, and his eyes reflect the same determination he had. The next dawn, the British army attempts a surprise attack, descending from the hills in a desperate advance. The Angami, alerted by lookouts, react immediately. Screams and the clash of weapons fill the air as both sides fight for control of the village. Aken stands in the center of the battle, his spear and shield raised, defending every inch of ground with a fury that seems supernatural. Around him, Angami warriors fight like lions, inspired by the resilience and courage of their young leader. The British, surprised by the fierceness of the resistance, are forced to fall back, but they do not retreat entirely. Instead, they reorganize their ranks and attack again with renewed violence. The fighting becomes intense and chaotic. Aken feels the weight of the battle, every wound and blow piling up on his body. Yet in the darkest moments, he remembers Niang's words and his father's sacrifice. With every thought of them, his will grows stronger, his resolve becoming an impenetrable shield. After hours of fighting, the enemy finally seems to be giving ground. The British, exhausted and wounded, decide to temporarily retreat, promising to return with reinforcements. Aken watches the retreat warily, knowing that this respite is only a pause and that the enemy will return, perhaps stronger than ever. But for now, Konoma still stands, and the Angami have proven once again that they will not be defeated so easily. As night falls, Aken and the surviving warriors gather in the village's central square, where elders offer words of gratitude and encouragement. Aken feels the weight of the gazes upon him, the recognition and admiration of his people. Though he has gained respect, he knows the battle is far from over. His eyes search for Niang in the crowd, and when he finds her, she gives him a calm smile full of pride and hope. That night, Aken realizes that his fight is no longer just a matter of surviving the next day, but of defending the legacy of his people, of honoring his father and all those who have sacrificed everything for Konoma. The village still faces a formidable threat, and Aken knows that the days ahead will be even darker. However, he now carries with him not only the spirit of his ancestors, but also the promise of Niang and the memory of his father. The sun is barely breaking over the horizon when Aken and his fellow warriors rise, exhausted and covered in wounds, but with an unbreakable strength in their hearts. The battle of the previous day has left the village scarred, not only in its broken architecture, but also in the souls of those who survived. In the early hours of the day, as mist covers the fields and mountains, Aken senses an eerie stillness in the air. He knows this silence is the prelude to another storm. During the night, the elders and the most experienced warriors have devised a new plan of defense. The village cannot withstand a prolonged siege. Its resources are limited, and with each passing day, the enemy grows stronger with the arrival of reinforcements. The elders have decided to send messengers to nearby villages to ask for help, hoping that other villages will join the resistance and form a coalition of warriors that can confront the British. However, Aken and the young warriors know that these efforts may not be enough. The British, with their modern weapons and military discipline, are an enemy unlike any the Angami have ever faced. Aken has begun to understand the true magnitude of the sacrifice this war may require. And though his bravery remains intact, he is beginning to notice the invisible scars the battle is leaving on his spirit. As the council discusses the plan, Aken watches the elders with a mixture of respect and doubt. He realizes that while his experience is invaluable, perhaps his youth and connection to the younger warriors grant him a different perspective. So, he makes a bold decision. He requests permission to speak in front of the council. Surprised, the elders grant him the floor. Aken voices his concerns about defensive tactics, proposing a more flexible and aggressive strategy. He suggests dividing the warriors into small mobile groups that can move quickly and attack the British in their camps, disrupting their supplies and exhausting them before they can mount a direct assault on Konoma. His argument is simple but powerful. If they can keep the enemy on the move, forcing them to fight in hostile terrain and with limited resources, they will have a greater chance of holding out. The elders, initially skeptical, begin to consider the proposal seriously. Aken's youth and his leadership in recent night raids have proven his tactics effective, and his bravery has instilled confidence in the village's warriors. Ultimately, the council approves his plan. Squads of warriors skilled in ambushes and guerrilla tactics will be formed, and Aken will be charged with leading these groups on constant raids against the enemy. That same evening, as the warriors prepare for the next raid, Aken meets Niang by the river that runs through the hills. She, who has been tirelessly tending to the wounded, appears exhausted but still retains a serenity that Aken finds comforting. The two sit by the riverbank, sharing a few minutes of peace before war calls them back. "Today I saw a man die in my arms, Aken," Niang whispers. "He just looked at me and asked me to tell him stories of home. I didn't know what to say to him." Aken listens to her in silence, understanding the burden she also carries. Like him, Niang is fighting in this war, but her battlefield is different. While he wields the spear and faces the enemy, she faces death every day, trying to save lives and ease the pain of those who fall in combat. "Your work is as important as any warrior's, Niang," he says softly. "You are the reason why so many of us are still standing. Thanks to you, we do not give up." Niang gives him a sad smile and takes his hand. Aken feels a deep, silent connection with her, a bond that has been forged in the fire of battle and shared suffering. They both know that, although their paths are different, their destinies are intertwined by this war and by the love of their people. Night falls, and with it comes the first surprise attack by Aken and his warriors. Stealthy as shadows, they slip through the hills and approach the British camp. Following their strategy, the groups attack from different directions, throwing stones and spears, setting fire to tents and food stores. The British camp is filled with chaos and confusion, and the disoriented soldiers try to defend themselves without success. The attack is swift and fierce, and before the British can react, Aken and his warriors disappear into the darkness, leaving a trail of destruction. Over the next few weeks, such attacks become a regular occurrence. British morale begins to wane, while in Konoma, spirits rise. Aken becomes a symbol of hope and resilience for his people, and warriors from other villages begin to join the cause, inspired by news of Angami victories. Resistance grows, and with it the confidence that perhaps they can stand up to the foreign power. However, as the conflict escalates, so does the brutality of the British. Angered by their losses, the officers decide to retaliate and begin attacking other nearby villages, burning homes, and capturing those who refuse to submit. Aken feels bitter guilt upon learning of these acts. He knows that in part his fighting has brought about these reprisals, and the weight of this responsibility begins to crush him. One day, as Konoma's warriors regroup after a raid, Aken receives devastating news. One of the neighboring villages, home to friends and family, has been razed to the ground. The stories of the destruction are terrifying, and Aken feels a rage and grief that consume him. That night, he sits silently in front of the fire, staring into space, questioning whether his resistance is leading his people to an even greater catastrophe. Ning, who has also heard the news, approaches him. They stare at each other in silence, and she can see the guilt in Aken's eyes. Without a word, she sits beside him, offering him the comfort of her company. Finally, he speaks, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Ning. Every time we hit, they hit harder. Our people are suffering, and I can't stop it." Ning listens intently, allowing him to vent his pain. "Aken," she tells him in a firm voice, "freedom always comes at a price. Your father and all those who have fought knew that. If we do not resist now, our children will live under the yoke of those who oppress us. They will never understand the value of these lands, of our people. Only we can protect that." Her words infuse Aken with a renewed sense of purpose. Though the price is high, he understands that Konoma's fight is not just for the current generation, but for all those to come. He knows that his people deserve to live free, that the sacrifice is not in vain. That night, Aken decides that he will not let himself be overcome by guilt, but will use his pain as fuel to keep going. At dawn, Aken and his warriors mount one of their most daring raids. This time, their goal is not just to weaken the enemy, but to send a clear message. Konoma will not submit. With meticulous precision, they launch an attack that paralyzes the British Army's operations in the hills. Aken leads the assault with a ferocity that leaves his comrades and enemies stunned, and for a moment he seems almost unbeatable. With each blow, he reaffirms his promise to defend his land and his people, no matter the cost. At the end of the raid, the warriors return to Konoma with fewer casualties than expected. This victory is greeted with joy in the village, and although the fighting continues to be tough, the inhabitants of Konoma feel that the spirit of their ancestors is with them. Each victory reminds them that their resistance is more than a fight for survival. It is an affirmation of their identity, of their right to be free and live in peace. Yet Aken knows there is still much to face. The British are relentless and will not give up easily. But now, on the threshold of another battle, Aken feels a renewed strength within him. Looking at Ning in the crowd, Aken realizes that he is not alone in this fight. His love for his land, for his people, and now for her, gives him a strength he has never felt before. She smiles at him, and in her eyes he sees a silent promise of support and companionship. Aken realizes that even though the days ahead are dark, he has something to fight for, beyond the battle itself. The following days are filled with tension, but also with a strange calm. Both sides prepare for the next confrontation, aware that this could be decisive. Aken and his warriors remain alert, occupying strategic positions around the village, while the elders and women take charge of strengthening the barricades and storing provisions. Niang's presence continues to be a fundamental support for Aken. She not only heals his physical wounds, but also the invisible ones, those left by guilt, loss, and fear. Between moments of calm, they find small spaces to talk, and in those shared words, they forge a bond of trust and love that grows in silence. Although neither of them dares to express it openly, both know that what they feel is as strong as the commitment they have to their people. One night, while checking the village's defenses, Aken and Niang meet at the ancestral temple, where warriors pay homage to the protective spirits of the land. The temple, lit only by the glow of torches, exudes a solemn, spiritual air. Aken kneels and offers a silent prayer, asking his ancestors for the strength to protect his people. As he finishes, he feels a hand on his shoulder. It is Niang, who looks at him tenderly. "Your spirit is strong, Aken. The ancestors hear you. They know that you fight not only with your body, but with your heart," she says in a whisper. Aken looks at her, grateful. In that instant, he realizes that although the conflict is great, his love for Niang is a light in the midst of darkness, a hope that reminds him that there is a future worth fighting for. With that renewed conviction, he promises that he will protect not only his people and his village, but also this love that blossoms between them. However, the enemy is quick to remind them that they will not be given any respite. At dawn, a lookout sounds the alarm. The British have been spotted at the foot of the hills, advancing with a reinforced formation. They have brought up more troops and artillery, determined to crush the Angami and take Konoma once and for all. Aken knows that this battle will be decisive. The fate of the village and its people depends on the courage and unity they can show in the coming hours. The Council of Elders quickly assembles to organize the defense. Aken and the young warriors prepare to face the onslaught, spreading out in the most vulnerable positions. The tension is palpable in the air, and Aken watches the faces of his companions, some marked by fear, others by fierce determination. He himself feels the weight of responsibility crushing him, but he clings to the promise he made. He will fight until his last breath. As British troops approach, Aken gives his warriors final instructions. "We fight for our freedom, for our ancestors, for those who are gone, and for those who will come. If we fall today, let it be with honor. Let the enemy forever remember Konoma's bravery." Aken's words spark a war cry from his comrades, a roar that echoes across the mountains and sends a clear message to the enemy. The battle begins with a series of earth-shaking cannon shots, and soon both sides are locked in brutal combat. Aken, at the center of the fight, moves with agility and precision, guiding his warriors and facing the British soldiers with a ferocity that seems inhuman. The British, despite their superior numbers and technology, find in the Angami warriors a resistance they had not expected. Every attempt to advance is met with ambushes and surprise attacks. Every inch of land is defended tooth and nail. Aken fights tirelessly, his spear and shield moving like extensions of his body, protecting his comrades and striking down enemies with a skill that makes him an imposing figure. As the battle progresses, however, the situation becomes critical. The British press hard, and casualties at Konoma begin to mount. Aken feels fatigue creeping in, but he does not allow himself to give in. At one point in the fight, his gaze meets that of Niang, who is safely in the rear, tending to the wounded. That brief moment of connection reminds him why he is still fighting, and a surge of energy drives him on. The battle drags on into the nightfall, and when the British finally decide to retreat to regroup, Konoma's warriors remain standing, exhausted but victorious. Although they know the enemy will return, they have managed to defend their home once more. And this victory, however momentary, is a reaffirmation of their unbreakable spirit. That night, the village is enveloped in a mix of mourning and hope. The fallen are remembered with respect, and the survivors find solace in the company of their loved ones. Aken, however, feels a mix of emotions that consume him. He has fought with everything he has, but he knows that this war is far from over. Responsibility and the pain of each loss weigh on his heart. And though he tries to maintain his composure, emotional exhaustion eventually catches up with him. In the silence of the night, he meets Nying again on the outskirts of the village. They are both exhausted, marked by the invisible scars of battle. She approaches him and, without saying anything, embraces him. In that embrace, Aken feels the weight of war dissolve for a brief moment. Nying's warmth, her silent comfort, gives him a peace he thought was lost. "Thank you, Nying," Aken murmurs, unable to stop a tear from escaping his eyes. "I don't know how much longer I can bear this, but your presence gives me strength." She caresses his face, wiping away the tear tenderly. "You are not alone, Aken. As long as there is love and hope, we have something to fight for. Never forget that." Her words give Aken a renewed sense of purpose. He understands that this fight is not just his own, but that of his entire people, of every life that clings to freedom and dignity. In Nying's gaze, he finds the strength to keep going, to face whatever fate throws at them. In that instant, he makes a promise to himself. If he can survive this war, he will dedicate his life to building a lasting peace for Konoma and his people. A peace where love and hope can flourish without the constant fear of destruction. The village, though wounded, stands firm, and the Angami warriors, led by Aken, prepare for what will perhaps be the final showdown. They know that the British will return, and this time they will come with all the force they can muster. But they also know that Konoma's spirit is unbreakable, and that as long as one of them stands, the village will not fall. To know more about the fascinating folklore of Nagaland, we invite you to follow us, as our stories are the result of arduous exploration in reliable sources like Naga Journal, Intact Archive, Sahapedia, and Eastern Mirror, which preserve and document the cultural traditions of the tribes of Nagaland.